The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Left versus the Right. And I'm David Paterson, and joining me today, as he has so many times in the recent past, is James Flippin of WABC. And we are ready to get right into the issues. Yesterday, the peace talks began in Alaska. The president is there. Vladimir Putin is there. I don't think that people in the Ukraine are particularly happy about how this could come out. I don't think a lot of countries in Europe are happy about it. But if they reach some kind of agreement, they're going to have to live with it. Wouldn't you say that, James?
Yeah, I mean, Governor Paterson, first of all, great to be back on Left versus Right. Always a pleasure. And I think that's exactly right. I think that ultimately you can't escape reality. Ultimately, we had heard years ago when this war first kicked off with the initial invasion that it was going to be over in a matter of days, that it was going to be over in a matter of weeks. Obviously, that didn't come to pass. Why was that? It's because NATO and the United States, in some combination, provided all these weapons, provided all these arms. So you could argue and kind of make the case, I'd certainly be willing to do so, that the members of Congress and the Biden administration made this war last longer than it really needed to. Now, no war is a good war. I think everybody probably agrees with that in our listening audience. It's a terrible thing, all the loss of life. But in spite of themselves, both sides of this conflict need to put down the guns, put down the bombs, figure out a way to live with each other. In essence, it's a protracted civil war that's come from the result of the dissolution of the USSR. I mean, when you really get down to it, Eastern Ukraine is very Russian. They speak Russian. They're mostly Eastern Orthodox. It's an odd reality, Governor Paterson, when you think about the fact that the USSR fell out and there's all these different things that result from that. The infightings, the jockeying for position. NATO has a role to play in that. Moscow has a role to play in that. And the United States has a role to play in it. So obviously, I'm hopeful that this results in a protracted peace agreement.
You know, so often people do things because they are focused only on how it affects them. And that's where I think the Biden administration really blew it toward the end of their term. How much more foresighted would it have been had he tried to create peace talks at that time, if he even would have been able to do that? And how much would it go down in history that either they reached some kind of an agreement at that time or at least that they tried? Mm-hmm. It's as if they just sat there, let the clock run out, and it wasn't just what was going on between Russia and the Ukraine. There was a whole lot of things over here that they didn't bother to really address, except for, pardoning a bunch of people.
Right.
Which the whole thing wasn't cool. And history is interesting. Sometimes it reflects 10, 20 years later. No, history is reflecting on them right now.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think that it's fair to note that President Biden, in his diminished mental faculties, may not really have been as at the switch as we thought, as in control as some would have liked. You know, in essence, there was this cabal of individuals, or maybe several individuals, who were kind of pulling the strings behind the scenes. We don't know exactly who that was, but unfortunately, you need a strong individual, a strong executive to potentially say, enough is enough with this fighting, enough is enough with this war. I'm going to use the power of the presidency to bring these people together, figure out a way to negotiate a compromise. I don't even think Biden was thinking about that. And furthermore, to the extent that his administration might have been, they had the whole Israel-Palestine thing that was popping off at the same time. So that kind of threw a gum in the works when it came to potentially trying to reach a peace agreement in Russia-Ukraine, because you had almost a two-front thing going on from a foreign policy perspective. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Governor Paterson. It's really a sad reality that something like this didn't happen sooner. President Trump campaigned on it, that he was going to make sure the war stopped in days. Obviously, that hasn't come to pass, but really hopeful that this could be the step in the direction that we really need.
Not only do I agree with you, James, but that was President Trump on the phone. to tell you that you're echoing exactly the type of policy that he's trying to persuade the other countries to accept at this time.
You know, Governor Paterson, as the representative of the right on this show, I'm just trying to be a good little MAGA guy. That's all I can do. MAGA Jim, as Greg Kelly calls me.
Oh, that's great. And so looking, the talks were yesterday. It's not clear, how long they'll stay there. You know what I forgot? And I have to admit this on the air. I have to admit this. Where they are in Alaska is very close to the international date line.
Huh.
I, don't think I thought about the international date line unless I was back in high school.
Yeah, right. Or like on New Year's Eve or something.
Yeah,
like, is it New Year yet?
Yeah, right, exactly. It's New Year's. In
Australia or whatever,
someplace, and then it gets to us, 4 or 5 hours later,
right?
But it's
because it's Anchorage, right, where they actually had their
exactly, and they put it there because they wanted the other side of the date line not to be in different cities, so it's somewhere in the ocean. Because the line goes completely around the Earth, but it's somewhere in the ocean. That the days change.
The actual date line.
Only the fish and the whales know it over there. So getting back
Is
to
it tomorrow or yesterday? I don't know.
Getting back to more serious issues, as you know, I endorsed Eric Adams, the mayor, this week. Mm-hmm. It was well covered by WABC and a lot of other networks. And so I'm here to explain why I did it. And it was that he and I have a relationship that goes way back. It's not, people in politics, they my beloved friend and that kind of thing. They probably knew him for 6 years. But I knew him really from the time I was elected to the state Senate. He was a police captain, and there were a number of very controversial shootings and that kind of thing during that time. And we were trying to organize to try to limit that. And things are a whole lot better now than they used to be. Mm-hmm. But he went on to become a state senator as I'm becoming lieutenant governor. And then he was extremely supportive of me when I was investigated when I was governor for really improper reasons. I wish I knew President Trump at the time. Well, I knew President Trump at the time, but I wish he had called me and told me about the term fake news, because I knew exactly what that meant when he talked about it. But during that time, and even when you haven't done anything wrong, the fact that you're being investigated, it's difficult to sleep.
Yeah.
Your family members are anxious and that kind of thing. But he was one of the people who would always call to see how I was doing and that kind of thing.
You're talking about Mayor Adams.
And so I was more than happy to endorse him in 2021. And look, when the alternatives were Maya Wiley and Andrew Yang, it wasn't
much of a choice
to endorse Eric Adams. And then I was going to endorse him this year. But at the end of last year, he started to have all these legal problems, and it just seemed, impossible for him to run. And I don't have a law license, James, but I did practice law in the Queen's District Attorney's Office under supervision. And at that time, we just had a feeling, if you get indicted by the feds, you can kiss your family goodbye.
That's pretty much most of the time. That's true.
Most of the time, that's
Southern District, Eastern District. You're looking at like a 90% conviction rate, probably most of the time.
Absolutely. And so when I saw that, in terms of where Mayor Adams was, I was going to sit out the campaign, but the New York County leader Keith Wright asked me would I come and endorse the former governor Andrew Cuomo with him, and he ran the state for 11 years, and he managed the state, very well. He had other problems.
Now, can I stop you for a second? You've talked about in the past that you had some clashes with Cuomo back when he was Attorney General, and talking about some of the things you're alluding to with this look at the tickets or whatever, improper benefits, this whole thing that turned out to be really ridiculous. But you kind of swallowed your I don't know if pride is the right word, or you buried the hatchet. You didn't hold a grudge. You thought it was the right thing to do, I guess, for what, the city and the party to step up for Cuomo at that time?
Yeah. Now, oddly enough, when I wanted to step up for Cuomo, I did not even have an inkling of the danger that would exist if Zoran Mamdani won the primary. It wasn't even a factor in my decision. Mm-hmm. But I did think that when he won, that Governor Cuomo, I think, was stunned. I think he was shocked because he didn't really run much of a campaign.
Right. And you talked to him at the time, right? I mean, he more or less said, "Oh, I could have done more. I could have done better. It's, a shame. It's regrettable."
Yeah. Well, but publicly, there was one particular interview where he said, the geniuses told me I was up by 15%, and he went on and that kind of thing. And I saw that as him pushing the blame off on people who he hired, for your goodness sakes. And, and I felt that since that time, the energy is there. He's trying. He's working hard. But he just seems to be just not in his usual way of addressing issues. He did get Mamdani on the issue of where he lives.
Right.
And they said, how can you live in this place?
Or whatever. It's
and you're talking about helping all these other people.
Yeah.
I mean, he's, a very good debater, and he brings the right issues up. But I kind of thought that that Eric Adams had, weathered the storm. He's trying to make a comeback. And, sometimes the best time to help people is when no one else will.
Sure.
And so, I wanted to put the endorsement in, it hopefully, settles all the times that he was helpful to me. However, and I want to get your opinion on this, he has too many constituencies. He has the Trump people who liked what he did with Tom Homan and the migrants and that sort of thing. Then he has, the unions that had been with him in 2021, and he's sure expecting to have them. But when you have that, it really doesn't help that you vetoed a bill to increase the salaries of delivery drivers and who are unionized.
Right.
That won't go over very well. So his problem is, as I see it, he doesn't really have a main base. If you had a candidate who was, say, of Puerto Rican descent, you would figure, well, they'll probably get the votes from that neighborhood where they live.
Right.
That'll be there. But right now, he's kind of a man without a country.
Yeah. Well, I think that the problem for a guy like Adams is your point is really well made in terms of understanding the politics behind it, right? Which admittedly, Governor Paterson is not something that I know as well about. James Flippin here as the news guy, I kind of observe it from the outside looking in. You know more about the way to build a campaign, try to form that coalition, where are the votes coming from? It's all really fascinating stuff. But you make the point of the Trump voters who may have had some level of satisfaction or happiness with seeing Adams partner with Tom Homan to kick out some of the migrants who came here illegally. I think, in essence, there's some member of the right-leaning voter coalition who say, okay, good for you, Mayor Adams. Glad that you did that, but you still were part of the problem in the first place. In other words, you were all for sanctuary cities back in 2021 and back in 2022. You talked about how it's part of the New York spirit and part of the New York idea, and there's nothing you can do, and I can't do anything, and I'm totally feckless when it comes to this. So there's some problems there with the migrant thing, even though he kind of did gain some points, I think, in some ways by doing that.
And President Trump kind of tipped his hat to him. By the way, just, for historic
reference purpose.
John Katsimatidis and I were at the Alfred E. Smith dinner, and Mayor Adams is there. We're talking, and President Trump comes in. He comes over, shakes everybody's hands. When he gets to Mayor Adams, he doesn't even let his hand go. He says, the things that they're doing to you are what they did to me. But we can talk about that later. And I thought, oh, wow. The one thing about Donald Trump is that 2 centuries from now, people will still be trying to figure out how clever he is because he got everybody thinking about something to the point where whatever we were talking about, it seemed like everybody forgot it.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of his endearing qualities. You know, there are about 5 or 6 things I could cite you that I think are not endearing.
Not so endearing from
about
your
him,
view.
but he does have that, and he's and then it wasn't. Let's see, that would have been November of last year, right as the president-elect is about to become president.
Mm-hmm.
But he started working on trying to help Adams by February and March of this year. So, you know, he'll get a little bump from that. But as you say, the history of people's conduct and what their decorum was does not separate him from other Democrats who, you know, have the same sort of feelings basically that he does. So he may not be as strong with that group as even if President Trump wanted him to be.
Yeah, right. That I think you're making my same point for me, which is just that, like, in essence, I think there's a perception that even if there was some level of unfairness in Adams being charged, right, indicted, because I think there's a lot of people who say, oh, they're all doing that straw donor stuff. It's shady. It's weird. The public financing, the matching program. Why do we even do that? Taxpayer dollars should not be spent on campaigns. These politicians voted themselves just a way to get more money into their campaigns. A lot of people would probably say that, but also say not necessarily fair that a Bill de Blasio never faced any problems with that, even though he was looked at and came pretty close. And then yet Adams did. And some people said, well, maybe it's in part and parcel connection to the migrant issue, which, you know, Adams at least had some critical tone in comparison to some of the Brandon Johnsons of the world or Karen Basses of the world or something like that. But I just think that the overarching thinking is that maybe that whole deal was expedient, right? Like that Adams wanted the charges dropped, Trump wanted migrants deported, and they made a deal. That doesn't necessarily get a lot of buzz going amongst voters. It's like, okay, I see what that is, kind of tit for tat. I also just want to mention one thing and then ask you a question. That Mamdani living in a rent-stabilized apartment is an absolute disgrace. And rent stabilization in and of itself is a disgrace and has led to a housing destruction within the city of New York because it means there is no middle class. There is no middle class. It's the lowest of the low and the highest of the high. And rent stabilization should be outright eliminated. And certainly Zohran Mamdani should not be living in a rent-stabilized apartment. What a disgrace.
Well, James, I'll be happy to answer your question. And in addition to that, you said something a couple of minutes ago, or you mentioned a name that I can't resist capitalizing on right after we come back from these very important messages.
What a
More
tease.
important than what I'm saying, but at least I'll be back when they're done.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right
Entertaining and informative.
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back on the left versus the right, and boy, did we have some cliffhangers before we went off the air for our sponsors just a few minutes ago. So in answer to your question, James, which is that, you know, the city has destroyed itself in a number of ways, I couldn't agree with you more. Mm-hmm. And I don't understand why people in authority have not tried to forestall it. And, you know, really around the time that, you know, I was growing up in the late 50s and 60s, we lived in Brooklyn. And, but my parents didn't like the education system there. We moved to Long Island. And a lot of people did that kind of thing during, you know, that period. And now it's happening again.
Yeah.
People are finding other places to go. So now to the name you mentioned.
Oh, yeah.
When you were citing some people who were really not in touch with their constituencies, you mentioned the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson.
Yeah.
Yes, him. That guy, the only thing I'll say for him is after campaigning with a script that must have been written by Zohran Mamdani, he did get up and make a statement about a week ago that basically the law enforcement component of government was in debt, that the educational system was such that they might have to increase class sizes, that the healthcare situation was dire. They might have to close hospitals. All of this after he campaigned from the Mamdani handbook. And the only thing I can say is I at least am pleased that instead of playing games or pretending that it wasn't happening, that he came right out and basically said, you shouldn't have voted for me.
This is reality. Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's a good observation, Governor Paterson. I had not noted that Mayor Johnson made those comments.
Just a week ago, he put out a state of the city sort of address.
Well, within this past week, we had Thomas DiNapoli here in New York, the comptroller for the entire state, talking about how there's financial trouble in the offing for New York City. And duh, you think so? Yeah, absolutely there is. Because all these taxpayers are moving out. The services and the cost of services continue to go up. You've got underfunded liabilities when it comes to overtime, underfunded liabilities when it comes to the housing support program that we were just alluding to. It's all not a good mathematical equation. And when you bring in a guy like a Zohran Mamdani, who's kind of like more or less saying, I'm going to continue to get money from the air and just, money grows on trees and it's going to be all good, it really strains the credulity of what are we even doing here? There's a part of me that maybe, and you're putting a thought into my head now, and sometimes I get a little bit crazy and I think to myself, am I dreaming here? Am I trying to be too optimistic? Whatever it may be. There's a lot about the Zohran Mamdani thing where I say, he's not that different from the people who lead the New York City Council. He's not that different than Mayor Bill de Blasio, except for the fact that de Blasio never co-signed the boycott, divest, and sanction thing with Israel. So maybe Mamdani is almost clever like a fox in the sense that he knows what he has to say to get in. He knows what he had to say to win the Democratic primary. Maybe he knows what he has to say to get in to win City Hall. He's already been backtracking a little bit on the NYPD defunding stuff. There's a part of me that thinks...
Well, sure, they shot 4 people at 345 Park Avenue.
That exactly
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And one of them was Muslim, the police officer who was working off duty at the desk.
Yeah.
So he goes to see the family and he goes to the funeral and then he comes and, he was significantly... And from one human being to another, to have to make those appearances, I've had to do it. It's very difficult, and it's very exhausting, your emotions are on your sleeve. But he comes back, and all of a sudden, he's got an idea. Well, maybe we shouldn't defund the police.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean. I don't know how I felt about that because in one respect, he really said the right thing, but he could have said the right thing at other times.
True.
But he picked the situation where there was a relationship, not a family relationship, but a relationship in that he and the slain police officer were of the same faith.
That's a good point.
But I just think that one thing, though, I'm not sure if he thought he could get the votes in the Democratic primary. I thought he was running as the wild socialist and saying the things that, are, pretty much from the socialist handbook. And then he looked up one day and he's ahead in the polls and it's like, oh, wow. How did that happen?
Well, you know what? That certainly has happened before. We know that, George Santos, who's now in prison, basically created a whole story out of whole cloth while running for Congress, and probably because he never thought he was going to win. And he figured, I'll raise all this money through the campaign and pay myself a salary and somehow make that money work for me over the years to come. And, a lot of different politicians have done that, basically run in a counter district, a place that might be super red and you're a blue or whatever, and you're just trying to raise some money. So, yeah, it is certainly possible that Mamdani kind of surprised himself by winning. It's also noteworthy that the stuff like defund the police, which really jumps off the page and makes everybody nervous because it's a quality of life issue to actually police violent crime and things like that. There's other issues out there that Mamdani is on the wrong side of that maybe there's not going to be as much pressure about during this campaign season, and that's pretty concerning. One of the things that I noted over the past week, Governor Paterson, was looking at some of the data from the city schools, the standardized testing and stuff like that. 40%, more than 40% of city students, I think it's grades 3 through 8. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's the
You're right.
Grade. They failed English and math. Over 40% came up with failing grades in English and math. And now what Mamdani wants to do is take city control away from the schools, take away City Hall's control over the school district, and more or less give it to the union. More or less make the union in charge. So to the extent that there's this symbiotic, negative, parasitic relationship between the unions and the city government and all this kind of stuff, and the teachers union is one of the worst offenders of that, we're actually looking at the possibility where we could have more than 50% of our students failing English and math.
Well,
and we can blame the union for that.
Well, James, if you're upset by the numbers you read last week, you should know that those numbers cited an improvement in the educational system over the last year.
And of course, COVID was such a bad thing for all the schools.
It was. But what I'm saying is when the improvement is still failure,
exactly,
it's failure.
It is.
It was kind of like, oh, we're doing so much better in English and math than we were before. But if you went into a store and people told you how much money you had to pay for things, and you can't add up the money, there's a problem.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Just staying on the mayoral issue, and this is the left versus the right. You're listening here on 77 WABC, and actually, no, this is the network show now, so it's Red Apple Audio Networks. I apologize. Red Apple Audio Networks and our flagship station just getting a mention there. But James Flippin, Governor Paterson, I wanted to ask you, Governor Paterson, about the whole endorsement process, right? Because that was a big moment for you this past week. You're constantly under pressure. I thought we were waiting until September. We were going to wait till September, right? And then see what happens. But you decided it was the right time to endorse Mayor Adams for re-election. Can you just kind of talk to me about what that process is like behind the scenes, where you've got consultants calling you up, newspapers calling you up, saying, who are you endorsing, Governor? Who are you endorsing, Governor?
Well, first, I'll say that the September idea, the one that John Catsimatidis and Judge Richard Weinberg and I talked about right here in front of WABC at 800 3rd Avenue. I realized, even almost as I was speaking, that none of these candidates are getting out. I can talk until I'm blue. They're not going to get out. And I realized that the waiting until September sounds good, but when you get up to September 15th, you're asking someone to drop out now because they're so far behind in the polls. And although I really did believe that if everybody dropped out and let Andrew Cuomo, who's now second in the polls, take on Mamdani, giving Cuomo a good 6 weeks to really come after him, that could really be a positive thing for the city. But at the same time, to your question, it's just kind of amazing. First of all, what a lot of the candidates do, and I don't remember doing this myself, they call you up and they're talking about different issues. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Blah, blah. Well, now that we agree on these things, you should have no trouble supporting me for mayor. I'm like, what?
Yeah, like where did that come from?
And I'm thinking, I even indicate that I might be interested. Then there'll be the financial pitch that's coming right after it. So, I have sometimes struggle with that because, you're just never sure how long your candidate is going to be viable. And also sometimes you're not sure how long your candidate is going to be substantive. Because you see a lot of this really happened in 2021. A lot of people jumped in the race, particularly Andrew Yang. And, he had all this money. He had no idea what goes on in the city. No idea at all. And, so you can get... Now, I said something to Governor Cuomo about what would happen if Mamdani were to win. This was right before he does win.
The primary.
And what I was sort of suggesting to him was, I endorse you for this primary. I did not endorse you for the general election. He didn't seem to like that very much, and I probably wouldn't either if I was him. But the point is that you get to the point where the phone rings, and you know the phone number, and you really don't want to answer it.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, obviously, I guess I understand it. The amount of living individuals who were governor of New York, for example, were mayor of New York. There aren't that many. And so it's a coveted endorsement, and I totally understand that. Nobody seems to be beating down the door to get Bill de Blasio's endorsement, although the word is that he's working with the Mamdani campaign, so that's not so surprising. Do you think
I'm shocked?
I'm totally taken aback. I'm just absolutely floored that Italian Mamdani, or whatever you want to call him, is at work with Zoran. Yeah, no, but I just, what do you think it is about these politicians that makes them so beholden to the endorsement themselves? Like, are they using that with fundraising purposes? Are they just hoping that that's going to continue to influence the public just because they respect an individual who might say something? Is it something that just continues to get them news coverage, and that's why they focus a lot on getting these individual endorsements, because it kicks the news cycle ahead? What do you think is their motivation on that mostly?
Excellent question. I think primarily the motivation comes from how many people who are considered to be objective and are considered to have weight in the city, or considered to have money, happen to be behind you. And when you go to, Assemblyman Johnson or something, and you lay all of that out, the assemblyman may think, you know what? Maybe the best thing for me to do is get on board, because I might have to ask this guy for something one day.
Right.
And so it's generally trying to present a picture of a person who is substantive on the issues.
Yeah, and building something. and
building finances to run for the race, and getting around and seeing a whole lot of people. And once you see a whole lot of people, you can mention the names of people who encourage you.
Right.
They may not have endorsed you,
right,
but they said, where you're going, good luck to you.
Right.
Did you know that the Bronx Borough president is waiting to endorse me? No, he said good luck to you, but you kind of, jigger it around so it works that way.
Sleight of hand, or
right,
how you perceive it.
And let me tell you, before I was in politics, my father was, but I had no idea of what the process was really like. But people would call me up and try to convince me to get my father to support that. And I'm like, listen, I have trouble getting my father to pay for my education at Columbia.
Right, exactly. I got my own battles there.
Yeah, I got my own battles with him. I can't waste any time on you. But that is such a great question, James, because it really gets beneath all the fluff to the gritty issues that go on politically and how they're actually handled. And not everybody is bad. For instance, when I used to raise money, I hated it. I hated asking people for money. So what I would do is I'd come in at 9 a.m., dial all the numbers, because who really comes to work at 9 a.m.?
Right,
nobody,
you know. You're going to walk in with a voicemail on your desk.
And then I would sit there hoping the phone didn't ring. But when the phone rang, now I know I have to answer it. I called them.
Yeah.
And that's when I would make the pitch.
Yeah.
In other words, I was just trying to slow it down and make it easier to ask people for money. One time, I called someone and I was telling them, I was sort of telling them, what's going on and that kind of thing. And I said, even though you may be supporting someone else, I think I'm going to win. And I just want to know if, we can keep the dialogue going later on. And the guy said, no, I'm supporting you. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, can you write a check? It's funny, but it's almost sad.
Well, it is
the level that people have to stoop to.
It is, and it's kind of crazy the extent to which it's so important in politics. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in our listening audience that's going to be super jazzed to think about that or realize that. But when you really get down to it, the name of the game is fundraising and coming up with money. And we talk a lot about how Kathy Hochul is supposedly so good at doing that. And, to the extent that Mayor Adams is still a factor in the race, I think he's been doing a good job in recent weeks of raising money. And you just think about it's such a ongoing thing. I read a tweet from Roger Stone the other day, Roger Stone of Red Apple Audio Networks, where he was saying that when I hear from well-meaning patriots saying that they're going to run in Texas or California and only rely on grassroots support, I say, great, you're going to lose. You got to have the money.
Exactly.
And it's just so, why is that, though? And we can kick it to the next break maybe because we're coming up against it. But
we need to raise some money right now.
Well, we do need to raise some money. That's exactly right. But I want to get into, what is it that all that money, and maybe I'm just a simpleton in terms of trying to understand it, but you figure there's TV ads, there's radio ads, there's in-person events, there's mailers, there's maybe staffers that you have to pay for. In essence, the economics of a campaign is something that we can kind of potentially dig in on because it's a fascinating subject. All this fundraising that we're alluding to, all this money that's being poured into the race, the mayoral race, and it's such an impactful one for New York City. But where is all that money going? And then I guess your thoughts, maybe, Governor Paterson, when we come back on the public matching program and if there is some upside to that because of all that. Not only that, but just flexing off that campaign issue and the mayoral race, I would love to also get your thoughts on the federalization of the police force down in D.C., because I think it connects to a lot of the issues we're talking about, defund the police, cashless bail, the more progressive, so to speak, policies surrounding violent crime. It all kind of factors into the mayoral race and what's going on in D.C. So it's the left versus the right. He's Governor David Paterson. I'm James Flippin, and we'll be back right after this.
The left versus the right on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The left versus the right.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to The Left versus the Right. I'm James Flippin on the right, and he is former Governor David Paterson of New York on the left.
And James, I have to tell you something.
Please do.
I was the first one to the studio today, and I came up here, and I only saw one chair. It's the chair on the right. It's the chair you're sitting in.
So you're thinking, what the heck? Did I get kicked out here?
I had to make a phone call, so I thought that the right wouldn't mind if I used the chair to make a couple of calls.
Yes.
Before you came in. But your questions are really striking at the core of what government should be, and also how much we should demand that government be better. So the public matching campaign, I always thought wasn't such a bad idea because sometimes people can try to run, like you were saying, what Roger Stone said to the people in Texas and Louisiana. I'm just going to run. I'm going to be grassroots. And he told them, you can stop right now. But I thought the public matching fund idea was good. I was glad that they didn't limit the amount of money that someone that wasn't in the matching program is raising, because they have a right to raise money and they have a right to run for office. But what is often the case is a lot of people, and you mentioned it, our friend from Long Island, I've forgotten his name, ran for Congress.
Oh, George Santos.
Yes, the last thing he expected, that he was really using the campaign to make money for himself.
Yeah.
And he would lose Then he would go back, and he'd pay what he's supposed to pay, and he'd have a whole lot of money. And to his chagrin, karma worked in an inverse way, and he won.
Yeah.
And that was the worst thing that ever happened to him.
Right.
But the federalization of the police force in Washington, what I really think about that, James, is that the president is on the right track, but he's on the wrong train. And I feel that because the numbers in Washington, D.C. have been getting progressively better. They're way better than they are in New York, believe it or not. But Washington is a good staging area if you want to make a point about law enforcement. So he's getting the benefit of the staging of it. Whereas if he had gone, there are some cities that are in really bad shape when it comes to crime. Miami, Florida, is a crime-ridden city at this time.
Well,
I would have thought he would take the toughest job and go after that one first.
Miami, Florida?
Miami, yeah.
You think that's the most crime-ridden city in America?
I think they admit it. Nobody even wants to go there right now.
To Miami?
Well, I'd
rather go there than Chicago or go to San Francisco or LA.
Yeah, because, if you're going to get mugged, you might as well not be cold when it happens.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. And actually, that's not even totally accurate because I love Chicago, especially in the summertime. But I just think that here's the thing about what you were just saying. For one thing, there's a lot of people on the political right, and I think I can speak for them in this context, who do not believe those so-called declining crime numbers. Police departments have the ability to do funny things with numbers. We've all seen the TV show The Wire on HBO.
Yes.
We know how they reclassify certain crimes. We know how they'll move what actually happened from one block to the next block because it's plausible given how it happened in this proximity, and it keeps the stats in certain districts down. And then they can say, oh, we're making so much progress and all this kind of thing. It's all well and good to tell us that. It's another thing to go down to Washington, D.C. You take the Amtrak train, you go into Union Square Station, and you say to yourself, if you're like me, that's weird. 20 years ago, when I was in college, I used to come here, and it was a vibrant commuter hub with a lot of businesses, with a Starbucks, with this, with that. People walking through, it was relatively clean, it was vibrant. It felt like the capital of the United States of America.
Right.
Now when you go through Union Station, I should say, down there in D.C., it's basically
squalor.
Camden. Newark,
yeah,
St. Louis. I don't know. I'm not really sure what to say, except that it's squalor, like you said. It's a homeless den. It's vacant. There's not a lot going on there. It's not very attractive. I mean, the bones of that station certainly are attractive because it's a beautiful example of architecture and all that kind of thing. But I think that there's a whole reality behind crime and the things adjacent to crime in American cities that we don't really talk about right now. The concept where you're supposed to walk down the street keeping your head down and not making eye contact with anybody, and you worry about that person over there in the corner who's talking to themselves and looks like they haven't washed in 2 months, and you're in these public spaces that are really supposed to be part of the vibrant life of a city, and you feel as though you just want to kind of keep your mouth shut, scurry along, and get through it as quickly as possible. That's not a vibrant, thriving cityscape. And that's what our Washington, D.C. has become. And it's an absolute travesty. And you have these ongoing so-called leftist progressive policies that basically keep cops' hands tied. They can't lock up repeat offenders. They can't actually keep people in on bail. To the extent that they're going to face any charges, it'll probably get pled down to some tiny misdemeanor. This is not the way people want crime to be treated in the United States of America. I understand that the Democratic politicians of the Washington, D.C. City Council think it's just great as they get chauffeured around in their SUVs and all this kind of stuff. But the rest of Americans don't really love it. And you even had the news anchor on ABC, I think it was, who was saying, yeah, I just got mugged the other day, basically.
Really?
Yeah, she was like, yeah, I was trying to go to my car and I got harassed and basically, made to feel threatened by this guy just down the street from the station. So the reality is that a lot of these new American cities are not pleasant places to be. And what they've done is kind of through sleight of hand suggest that it's not criminal, but it's basically low-key harassment. And it may well be actually within the statute of the law criminal. So for a lot of us, they say, let's say, and also you're going to talk progress from the COVID years, from the George Floyd summer or whatever. Is that progress? I mean, I don't know. I think that it would be great if it is a blueprint for LA, for a Chicago, for a New York, for a Miami. Why not? But I also think that DC in and of itself, we deserve a capital that is representative of the greatness of the United States of America, and we do not have that right now.
Well, I have always been a supporter of the police, even when my views on other issues would probably be well defined as to the left. Mm-hmm. But I always had a respect for the institution, police and firefighters. My father wanted to be a firefighter. He passed all the tests, and they denied him because he had asthma, and so he couldn't do it. And I have found, like, my interactions with the police, when I've had them, were very good. They were, situations. One very notable is that I was studying for a law school exam. I was living in Hempstead, Long Island. There's no one else in the house. Our family had a burglar alarm on the house, but I panicked and forgot that it was there. And somebody banged on the front door about 10 times and then kicked the door in. Now, I'm on the second floor, and I know this person is in the house. So I run to the bathroom window, pull up the glass window, knock the screen out, and jump out of the window, which was, 2 floors up, and somehow didn't kill myself. And I run away to a hospital, which was about 2 or 3 blocks away, and I asked him, can I use the phone? I use the phone. Now I'm walking back toward the house, and a police car shows up, and they stop me. And I said, I remember what I said. I said, officers, if I'm the person who robbed the house, why am I walking back toward the house?
Yeah.
And they looked at each other, and then I said, and one other thing, I don't have anything on me.
Yeah.
So
what did I take?
What did I take?
Yeah.
And finally, one of them said, well, how about this? Do you have a picture of yourself in the house? I said, I have a whole family album. We can have a couple of drinks. We can talk all about it. But the person that did this is getting away.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying that my interactions with them, and also...
so that's pretty scary, though. So you actually lived through a home invasion.
I sure did.
Wow.
And when I jumped out the window, for those of you who are watching this, it wasn't a straight drop. There was a kind of a slanted way that the kitchen window, it was a slant.
Yeah.
So I had to jump past it because I had once tried to jump out and hit the slant and broke my wrist.
Ooh,
so
wow.
I got to do this right this time.
Right, you knew what you had to do.
But they could not have been nicer, and they could not have been more supportive. And also, I must say that my brother was hit by a truck when he was 7 years old, and he was in Baldwin, Long Island, and they put the police call out, and a police officer from Hempstead realized that he could get to the scene faster than the Baldwin police could, and that's what saved his life. So I think that's where it all started with that rescue. And he came to the house, and it was interesting. My parents were at the hospital with my brother. He came to the house a few days later, and I realized I'm the only member of the family he actually ever met, but I never forgot him. His name was Frank Guzzo, Officer Guzzo from Baldwin, from Hempstead, Long Island.
Wow. And shout to Officer Guzzo. That's a great memory, and obviously we're all thankful that went down the way it did. I mean, look, anytime you talk about any profession, any walk of life, there are bad people in that walk of life, right? Because there are bad people. Just unfortunately, they're not all good. They're not all Governor David Paterson, okay? I'm going to say that much. But the reality of it is that you've got bad people in every walk of life, and you're going to have bad cops. And, they get highlighted because they do have a really important role in our society, and they do have a lot of kind of individual power in the moment, right? With the handcuffs and the gun and the nightstick. We get it. It's significant. And anybody who's been driving along the street at night and maybe you felt like you went a little too fast and you see those cop cars pulling behind you, you're thinking, oh boy, here we go. Everybody knows that anxiety, no matter what you did or didn't do or whatever it is. So I think your story is a good one in the sense that we should always try to remember that there's a lot of good people out there that do everything, but for sure, cops, fire, whatever, a lot of those people are doing it for a reason. Yes, it's a job, but there's a higher calling involved, and that's something that we can both agree on. So glad that you brought that up. But yeah, look, as far as the federalization of the DC police force, I think it's also worth noting that Washington DC just has kind of a complicated history in and of itself, right? It's not a state. It's not a city-state.
Exactly.
It's almost like a federal encampment or something like that.
Right.
So
I'm not trying to say that the president did not have the power to do this.
Right. You're just saying that you think that maybe the whole approach would be better, more well-founded in some of the bigger cities that have had some of these crime problems.
Well, they had some community policing methods that they were using, and apparently what I read yesterday is that when the National Guard came in, they didn't have the same instructions,
right? And
they didn't really know how to stop people. And of course, a lot of them were not in uniform; they just had suits on and had masks on, which could frighten people. You know,
right?
And maybe it's just that it needs to be adjusted and cleaned up a little bit, because we had to bring forces into states that were not complying with the Federal Civil Rights Act. And I'm sure when they came in to do that, it probably wasn't perfect. But it's the long-term gain, I think, that you're convincing me of, and you have succeeded.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Very glad to hear that. And look, Governor Paterson, we're almost out of time today. I do not want to spend any time discussing the New York Mets.
Please don't.
I'm just going to quickly move right past that, because there's actually something I do want to discuss.
Thursday night, I watched the game. They were ahead 6-0. I turned and I was watching a movie for a second. I turned back. They gave up 9 runs in the fourth inning.
That one was just...
pitching for the Mets, would not have given up 9 runs
absolutely.
In the fourth inning.
Actually, Governor Paterson, I can say with utmost confidence, despite any challenges you faced in your life, that you would have a better understanding of the strike zone and throw more strikes and be able to be more accurate with your pitches than David Paterson was during that. So anyway, we'll just leave it at that. But I just want to mention that Governor Paterson also stunting on us today in studio. And what I mean by that is he's got the mint green jacket with the plaid check, the pocket square that is just so ice cold. It's white, but it's also got the red flowers on it. And it is just you're killing it right now. I'm loving this look.
I can only thank my lovely wife, Mary, who has tremendous taste when it comes to clothes. And even someone like me, she can make me look halfway decent for most of the time.
All right. Well, you know what? Shout to Mary, and that's an amazing recap of the situation going on at the Paterson household. Because look, I'm right there with you, Governor Paterson. If it wasn't for my better half, I'd barely be dressed when I go out the house every day. So, all right, great to be with you on the left versus the right. Any final thoughts here on the mayor's race or anything that we talked about?
We'll be back next week, 3:00 on Saturday, right before John Sterling, and by that time, I'm sure I will have endorsed someone else for mayor.
But as Curtis Sliwa says, not me, don't endorse me, it's the kiss of death, okay?
Yes, exactly.
So, yeah, all right, he's Governor David Paterson. I'm James Flippin. This has been The Left versus the Right on Red Apple Audio Networks.
Thanks for listening to The Left versus the Right. You can hear The Left versus the Right Saturday afternoons at 4. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?